Joining us now to discuss the Chinese Communist Party announcing new climate plans is Michael Lucci, founder and CEO of State Armor. Michael, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Can you give us what were your thoughts when you heard China's move to set a goal of cutting 7 to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions by 2035?
This is just happy talk from China. They're the biggest polluter in the world. They've never cut any emissions in any way, anywhere. They just want to say that 10 years from now, maybe we'll cut by a little bit. Meanwhile, we want all the rest of you, the United States, Europe, etc., continue your complete deindustrialization of your economy so that we could take away your manufacturing base and we could produce the tools of war and industrial production, and you cannot. That's what China really wants here. They want all of us to deindustrialize, and they want all of us, furthermore, to adopt technologies that they control. And let me be really specific here. Solar inverters that are coming from China for our green energy technology, batteries that are coming from China for our green energy grid, these have kill switches in them. So China understands that the greatest power that they could have over the United States is the ability to turn off our power.
So in the end game here, what is China's goal?
The end game is we are deindustrialized and we are running our energy grid on things that they can turn off and on at their whim. I mean, that's exactly where they want to go. Candidly, that's where they already are with Europe. Germany has been massively deindustrialized. And if you look at the headlines from our friends on the other side of the Atlantic, you can find headlines where they say explicitly, China controls a kill switch for the energy grid of the entire continent of Europe. That's because Europe was so ambitious, in the bad way of ambition, to adopt all this green energy nonsense and all the technologies that come with it that, oh, by the way, happen to all be backdoored by communist China, whether it's windmills that are spying on military bases in Texas or military bases in Germany that have connectivity devices on them, whether it's solar panels, whether it's solar inverters, whether it's batteries. These are all coming with kill switches. And so the question should not be, should we in the Western world adopt green energy? The first question is, should we adopt any energy source that is controlled and has kill switches from the Chinese Communist Party? And the absolute bipartisan answer to that question needs to be absolutely not. We cannot let them put kill switches into our energy grid, into Europe's energy grid. That's a hard no. After that, we can have a conversation about what our energy makeup should look like, but it needs to be American made and resilient against the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay, Michael, let me ask you this. Under what circumstances would China actually use this kill switch on a wide scale? Because I would imagine if China did that, the consequences would be catastrophic.
I think that what China really wants to do is to surround the United States and surround Europe. And let me say what I mean by that. They want to have us so compromised that we begin to think that we shouldn't even consider resisting them in any way. If they do something super aggressive in the South Sea, if they were to even invade Taiwan, what they want us to be thinking is if we are going to go help friends in Taiwan or Japan or the Philippines, if we're going to go do that, they're just going to flip the switch here at home to slow not just our military deployments overseas, but also to sow absolute chaos amongst our civilian population. Our bipartisan leaders, if you get Democrats and you get Republicans, they will describe this in the same way. They say that China is preparing for a 0 day to sow everywhere chaos all at once, all across the United States on that day where maybe it's they go do something with Taiwan. Maybe it's they do something provocative somewhere else in the South Sea or in their theater. That's when they want to be ready for that. And really, I think what they want to do is never use the power because on the American side, we look at how booby-trapped they have our whole economy and we just say, we can't resist them. It's too late. That's where China's trying to get to.
Okay, so given the current situation that we are in now, whether it's the kill switches that you mentioned, how should the U.S. respond?
We should be ripping out anything coming to China with kill switches. And more specifically, when a Chinese company sells a solar inverter with an undisclosed backdoor, or when a Chinese company sells a battery with an undisclosed kill switch in it, that is massive consumer fraud. That is massive deceptive trade practices. And what we're starting to see now, and we really need to see this scale up, is state attorneys general are bringing the rule of law to the Chinese Communist Party. They are suing them for massive consumer fraud. So this is what we need. Sue them for massive consumer fraud, win a big claim against them, and use that money to rip and replace all these compromised Chinese Communist Party technologies. Sue, rip, replace, make them pay for the booby traps that they put into our system.
Can you put into context the actions taken by the Trump administration versus previous administration on this front specifically?
Well, President Trump is obviously much less convinced of the veracity of the whole green agenda. I mean, he thinks it's broadly a fraud. He's broadly correct on all of that. He understands that we can't be dependent on communist China for our energy or really for anything else, rare earths. He's already negotiating with China. And the very first thing China did in negotiations is they said, we're cutting you off from rare earth elements that you need for all sorts of parts of your economy. So President Trump understands that they have leverage over us and we need to wind that down. And he understands that we'll use that elsewhere if they have it, specifically green technologies going into our grid. President Trump, I think, is pretty clearly reorienting global supply chains away from the Communist Party. He's saying, if you want to sell to the United States, we want you as divorced as possible from the supply chains of the Chinese Communist Party, because we don't want them being able to intercept what we need here at home. That's his big objective that we can see clearly. He also objects to and rejects the whole sort of green radicalism. But the bigger objective is he's reordering global supply chains that serve the United States to not be beholden to the Chinese Communist Party.
Okay, Michael, just one last question. Can you talk to us about the influence that the CCP is having on the world currently versus its influence before? Has it increased or decreased?
Communist Party's influence is unfortunately massively increasing over time, whether it's 20 years, whether it's 5 years. But let's just talk about 5 years. Think about the fact that they unleashed upon all of us, the entire world, a global pandemic. They lied through their teeth every step of the way of that pandemic. They lied everything about that pandemic. And of course, they caused the pandemic through their carelessness at best. Even though that happened, the rest of the world has actually become more dependent upon supply chains from the Chinese Communist Party, whether it's rare earth, solar, or all these other things. And so their influence is spreading, and they are using that coercion against other countries. And that's why it's so important that the United States lead a breakaway to create supply chains of freedom, supply chains that are controlled by democracies, free countries, and their allies and their partners who they can trust. That's the problem here, is they have provoked the world in an unforgettable way through the COVID pandemic and all of their malfeasance through that. Yet the rest of the world has failed to respond, and candidly, President Biden failed to respond in any significant way to get us off dependence on the Chinese Communist Party. That's why President Trump is quite different. He recognizes that, really it's an existential danger. And he's saying we need supply chains that they cannot intercept and control. One last thing on that. I mean, the actual supply chains that we needed to protect ourselves during the pandemic that they caused, they cut those supply chains off. They commandeered American factories in China that would serve us products that we need. And they went all around the United States hoovering up the personal protective equipment, the medical equipment that we needed in the United States. They had their companies hoover that up across the United States, send it back to China, and then they took over our factories in China. So they cut us off from the supplies we needed to survive the pandemic that they caused.
Okay, really strong points there, Michael, today. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you.